Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Hey guys, let's learn. Caspian Report, great channel. How Russia is changing Baltic Sea borders. Okay. I have seen a video before about Kaliningrad, Russian territory in Kaliningrad, and Poland having a little bit of a dispute over a Polish, a canal, a small canal that Poland wants to build, which I don't know how you can have a dispute over a country wanting it to build its own access to the Baltic Sea without having to go through your waters to do so. So I have heard of that, but not much more. So I'm going in here a little blind, as is usual. Intro inserted. Too long. My name's Connor. If you're new, hope everyone's doing well. Let's go.
Coercion. 3 words: sabotage, intimidation, and coercion. 3 words that describe Russia's relationship with its neighbors. While Ukraine remains NATO's main focus, the Baltic region is now becoming a second hotspot. Finland and Sweden's entry into NATO has strengthened the alliance, but it has also fueled Russian countermeasures. Leaked documents from the Russian Defense Ministry suggest plans to change the nautical charts to redefine Russia's borders in the Gulf of Finland and near Kaliningrad. Specifically, they want to move the baselines that determine the maritime boundaries and, in doing so, expand their influence.
Guys, so leaked reports or is a leaked report from a government always for nefarious reasons by someone inside of the Russian government or of any government, or is a leaked report sometimes is leaked on purpose to send a message to people, but to also not have to officially say it? You know what I mean?
The Russians insist the leaked document is not politically motivated and that they're just following international law, but NATO officials aren't buying it. You see, underneath the calm waves, there's an ongoing hybrid conflict. Most of it is hidden from the public. Occasionally, fragments of this hidden war rise to the surface. Think of gas pipelines blowing up, submarine cables shutting down, and now maritime borders being redrawn. It's a war fought by all nations, but acknowledged by none. And so, as the sea grows quieter, ambitions grow louder. Borders define more than just land. They shape control, influence, and even privacy. Every day, our personal data is collected, sold, and used by data brokers.
Guys, fast forward if you want, but watching Caspian Reports channel, I'm going to watch through their ads. Make sure to use any links and promo codes if you're interested in it and you learned it here.
This is very frustrating. Up until a few months ago, I used to get these weird robocalls from abroad, and my inbox was flooded with junk emails. This is where Incogni comes in, the sponsor of this video. Incogni sends requests to hundreds of data brokers asking them to remove me from their lists. By law, these data brokers have to comply. The process is incredibly tedious on purpose, so most people don't even bother. Incogni, however, makes it easy and does everything automatically. Since I signed up, I get fewer calls. My email is less cluttered, and I feel better knowing that companies aren't abusing my personal information to raise prices based on my browsing history. There's a link in my description. It's incogni.com/Caspian Report. You can sign up for the annual plan to get 60% off. You do the annual plan so that Incogni can constantly scrub you off these lists because you're always being added to new lists. When you click the link, it helps support the channel. So please use the link, get that discount, and support our content. Nestled in Northern Europe, the Baltic is an inland sea connected to the world's oceans through the Danish Straits. For the nearby countries, it is a gateway to global markets, but also a way to project power abroad. The sea is like a highway for Europe's energy and security, with pipelines and cables running along its seabed to connect markets near and far. But the sabotage of Nord Stream 2 shows how fragile these systems are. With the right tools, even a minor attack can cause big problems, and neither Russia nor NATO is fully prepared to handle such threats. In the past, Moscow was a major stakeholder in the region. At one point, it controlled about half the Baltic coast, and Russian ships could travel freely there. But over time, as Russia declined in size, it lost much of that coastline. Today, it only controls 659 kilometers of the Baltic coast, which includes 512 kilometers by the Gulf of Finland and another 100.
Yeah, see, here's where Poland wanted to, or maybe they already have done it, create a small little canal so that they don't have to go into Kaliningrad Russian waters in order to get into the Baltic.
512 kilometers by the Gulf of Finland and another 147 kilometers near Kaliningrad. For its enormous size, Russia has a surprisingly small coastline, and its two main pockets have taken on enormous strategic weight. Kaliningrad is like an armed fortress packed with nuclear weapons, jet fighters, and military personnel. It's also home to Russia's Baltic Fleet, which has about 40 surface vessels and a few submarines. Tiny Kaliningrad has more firepower than some medium-sized countries and is often called a dagger pointed at the heart of NATO's eastern frontier. Meanwhile, a little to the north is St. Petersburg, Russia's gateway to Europe. This old capital is where the Kronstadt naval base is located, but the area is mainly an economic hub. St. Petersburg is one of the region's biggest financial centers. In 2021, before the Ukraine war, it accounted for 6% of all Russian exports. However, since Finland and Sweden entered NATO, Russia's already small coastline seems even smaller. The Gulf of Finland has become a narrow passage firmly under NATO control. This is a major threat to Moscow in ways it wasn't before. Estonia and Finland have an integrated coastal.
Wait, why are these white here? I always forget if these are Finnish or Swedish. I've asked and I've been answered, and yet I forget.
Ways it wasn't before. Estonia and Finland have an integrated coastal missile defense, and with NATO's air and naval forces nearby, any Russian ship trying to pass through the Gulf of Finland would face heavy attacks and likely end up stuck in a naval blockade. This means that in a conflict situation, Kaliningrad would be completely cut off from the Russian mainland, and Russian trade would suffer greatly. Having said that, the Russians have a plan to fall back on. For one, Kaliningrad is not as isolated as it might seem. The only thing separating it from the rest of Russia is the 100-kilometer wide Suwalki Gap, called NATO's Achilles heel. In wartime, Russia might try to push through the flat, less populated Lithuanian section. Taking the Suwalki Gap would cut off the Baltic states from NATO ground support, and with their occupation, Russia could connect Kaliningrad with reinforcements from St. Petersburg and break through any blockade. That sounds like a reasonable plan, but warfare in Ukraine shows that plans do not always survive first contact. What is certain is that Russia's position...
I understand that it is, a vulnerable gap separating the Baltic states and Poland and, this part of NATO from this part of NATO. But it's such an insane scenario where this would be all-out war between NATO and Russia that it's hard for me to even... It's like, yeah, that is a small, vulnerable choke point, but thinking about being in that conflict is so strange that I don't see it as... I don't look at it as vulnerable. That didn't make sense. Just forget it.
With their occupation, Russia could connect Kaliningrad with reinforcements
I get that it's vulnerable, but it's such an insane scenario that it's hard to comprehend.
from St. Petersburg. Russia could connect Kaliningrad with reinforcements from St. Petersburg and break through any blockade. That sounds like a reasonable plan, but warfare in Ukraine shows that plans do not always survive first contact. What is certain is that Russia's position in the Baltic Sea is at its weakest point in history. NATO has grown in size, depth and scope, all while chipping away at Russian influence. Now, some officials in the Kremlin have had enough, and the only way to win this game of chess is by flipping the board.
Okay.
On May 21st, 2024, the Russian Defense Ministry posted a draft decree on its website proposing to expand its maritime borders with Lithuania and Finland unilaterally. Within 24 hours, it was deleted. While the draft wasn't the official policy paper itself, it was, however, a technical guide linked to another policy document whose details or even existence remain unknown. Even so, the document declared it necessary to change the coordinating points to set new baselines in the Baltic Sea. A baseline is the starting point from where a country marks its territorial waters and exclusive economic zone. According to the law of the Sea Convention, countries can claim territorial waters up to 12 nautical miles from the baseline. Beyond that is the contiguous zone, which extends up to 24 nautical miles. In this zone, the coastal nation has limited authority compared to the full sovereignty it has in its territorial waters. Further beyond is the exclusive economic zone, which stretches up to 200 nautical miles from the baseline. Here, nations have the right to explore and exploit marine resources. In some cases, depending on the continental shelf, the legal boundary can reach up to 350 nautical miles. The baseline is the single most important factor that determines all these boundaries. It's the starting point.
I wonder why the continental shelf matters. Like, why would there being a shallower area, or why would there being a deeper area of water mean that that's off limits to you in terms of reaping the benefits of any resources there? That doesn't really make sense to me. I understand the terminology. It just, why is that the case?
Measuring the extent of maritime zones. So, if you push forward the baseline, you push forward the territorial waters, the exclusive economic zone, the contiguous zone, and so on. This then also affects the trading routes, jurisdictions, and insurances of all the neighboring nations. In other words, a maritime baseline is as essential to a state's territorial integrity as rivers, mountains, fences, and checkpoints are to its land borders. Russia's draft document aimed to rewrite this entire framework. It claimed that
that doesn't really
draft document.
Why not just make it so that your territory stretches to the largest extent? Why have all of the little subdivisions? I can understand maybe the first division, the kind of more solid blue color, and then the exclusive economic zone. But the ones in between, what does it mean to have, they're like technically yours, but you don't have as much control over them as you do the closer area? I'm assuming that the economic zone makes it so that you have the right as a country to any resources in this area, but you don't have the right to deny like free passage through this area as you might with the closest boundary, you know? But in terms of the middle one, I don't understand how that makes sense.
all the neighboring nations. In other words, a maritime baseline is as essential to a state's territorial integrity as rivers, mountains, fences, and checkpoints are to its land borders. Russia's draft document aimed to rewrite this entire framework. It claimed that the nautical charts used for Russia's current baselines were outdated and needed updating, preferably in Russia's favor. In a space as small as the Gulf of Finland, every nautical mile represents strategic depth gained or lost. However, Russia's argument isn't entirely baseless. The maps in use today haven't been reviewed since 1985, back when the Soviet Union was still in control. The leaked document proposes designating parts of the waters in the eastern Gulf of Finland and near the cities of Baltisk and Zelenogradsk in Kaliningrad as part of Russia's internal waters. To do this near Kaliningrad, Russia would have to change the baselines at the Curonian Spit, Cape Taran, and Vistula Spit. Meanwhile, in the Gulf of Finland, it would need to adjust the coordinates for the islands of Somers, Gogland, Seskar, Mali Vysotsky, Moshchny, Bolshoi Tutors, and Mali Tutors. It would also need to change the coordinates near the northern entrance cape of the Narva River. These changes would allow Russia to claim more surrounding waters as its territorial sea, shifting its maritime border and disrupting NATO's contiguity.
Okay, if there's something that needs updating from 1985 in the areas of Kaliningrad that might have some basis of reality that any other country might have the same argument, fine. But updating coordinates? How does that make any sense?
However, within 24 hours, the leaked document was deleted and Moscow denied any plans to change the Baltic baselines. In another time and place, this might have been called a harmless mistake. But just 2 days later, Russian border guards removed navigation buoys from the Estonian side of the Narva River, which separates the two nations. Out of the 50 buoys recently placed, 24 vanished overnight. This move was particularly alarming because the buoys, usually placed jointly by Estonia and Russia, are essential for safe navigation on the Narva River. When Estonia requested an explanation, Russian officials gave a vague response, stating that borders must comply with international laws and that the removal of the buoys was merely a technical issue. In truth, however, the incident demonstrated intent to act on a document supposedly leaked by mistake.
Okay, so that kind of answers my question that are leaked documents always just an insider who's doing something that their superiors wouldn't let out that they want out. Sometimes it can be like sending a text and then deleting it right away, but hopefully the other person read it right before you deleted it, so you can cause some confusion. And removing the buoys, it just seems like a... I mean, what are you going to do? Claim the whole river is yours? It just seems like I don't like you, you're in NATO, you're against my interests right now, and so it's kind of like a middle finger. Like it's just like a, yeah, like that kind of like an FU rather than like a signal of invasion or anything like that.
Intent to challenge NATO despite Russia's weakened military. So, in effect, it was the first opening shot in the Baltic battle space.
It's like if you and I had this agreement to build this fence together, but then I got in a disagreement with your friend, and even though you have nothing to do with that, I don't like you right now, so I'm just going to not... it's not the best analogy. All right.
Russia's actions in the Baltic Sea may appear reckless and aggressive, but the objective is to undermine NATO's capacity, not to conquer it. A direct war with NATO would be disastrous for Russia. So, the strategy is not to create a new front in the Baltic region, but to unsettle the current one in Ukraine. Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, Poland, Finland, Denmark, and Sweden are among Ukraine's strongest supporters. The Baltic states, for example, contribute an impressive 1.5% to 1.8% of their GDP to Ukraine, which dwarfs commitments by other NATO members. Thus, by stirring up territorial disputes, Russia...
Wow, so not even just you're using that in your defense spending, that's just flat out aid to Ukraine? Wow.
Shifts attention to the Baltic region while keeping the conflict ambiguous enough to limit broader escalation.
Okay.
The Kremlin hopes to...
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like you're not hinting that you're about to do anything, but you're just like throwing a little confusion because why not?
Exploit growing divisions in northern, central, eastern, southern, and western Europe. It's the classic divide and conquer policy. For the Russians, winning the war in Ukraine depends on weakening Europe's anti-Russian stance and breaking its united opposition to Moscow. Every citizen, politician, or leader who is swayed, intimidated, or softened has a ripple effect on Ukraine's support. Even small changes, such as a few less guns, a couple less air defense systems, or a delayed shipment of ammunition, can lead to gains on the battlefield. For instance, when Hungary delayed the EU's €50 billion financial aid package to Ukraine by 6 weeks, or when the US Congress temporarily postponed the $61 billion aid package, the delays hindered Ukraine's ability to sustain its war efforts and stalled its 2023 offensive. While Russia didn't necessarily cause these actions, they reflect the outcomes it seeks to achieve. However, as of 2024, over 70% of EU citizens approve of the sanctions on Russia, while 55% support military aid for Ukraine. This support is even more substantial in the Baltic region. For example, Estonia's newly elected prime minister vowed to support Ukraine until victory, while Poland pledged to increase military spending to 4.7% of its GDP. Additionally, Finland and Sweden's NATO memberships have bolstered the alliance's northern flank. The growing resilience of the Baltic region shows that Russia's strategy has not yet succeeded. So far, the Kremlin hasn't found a weakness to exploit, but that doesn't mean it never will. Redrawing borders, or threatening to do so, is a crucial part of Russia's hybrid war against NATO. Should the Baltic allies give way, they will quickly find that Russia doesn't just redraw maps, it redraws rules. I've been your host Shirvan from Caspian Report. If you approve of what we do, please leave a comment, hit the like button, and mayhaps share the video. In any case, thank you for your time, and Saul.
Great video. Yeah, so in essence, Russia is, why not cause a little bit of nervousness or a little bit of confusion into NATO? Like, why not do it? It doesn't, like, removing the buoys that it has with, was it Estonia? It just gives a little, like, what's up here, and then you have to talk to then NATO has to respond in some capacity. Probably like, yeah, they're doing that to mess us up a bit, but to Russia, that's the whole point. It's not like they're getting ready to invade, but it does drag some, even albeit a little, attention away from, or makes at least a little trouble for NATO. Then why not? So I understand that. Very interesting. Love y'all. Would appreciate any comments down below, answers to any of my questions, anything at all. Hope you're all doing well, and hopefully I'll see you guys next time. We'll keep on learning. Bye, guys.